Electoral Commission Naana Mensah sisi eja edani chema ederi yepa. Isa say Aferijan Edi Sembi Ababonte to a former President John Dramani Mahama, Vice President Dr. Mahmoud Alhaji Bawumia, any Nipadoma Ekanwa Munina April for presidential seat. Na Nsema Ababonte is almost say again Naana Mensah enhwe yepa. Isa say coming 7th of December yini na aye hwe nim say kwakwato aba na yi pani pa obetimi ababediga na nim na odi akokodu the promised land but sha asase ne so isa say yini na aye nim say Ghana e was one day kianikin e was Ghana when am so amasisi nsema ekofo Naana Mensah isi no anu ye de ye pa yini na aye nim say former President John Dramani Mahama odin say bi babonten say Naana Mensah ehwe na style or your calculations towards 7th of December no. On making sure say calculations be or ye no very correct and very true. And yes sir, 7th of December that day no. And yes sir, the embassy e Ghana has say no Naana Mensah onpe. Enti Aferijan edina no aba to nsem we nyina mu. Akebi na akwakoye nsem bebre me pese me se obre no adaje no kam ho na yekoti nsem a ekoso e wo ye my Ghana ma se ye che o no yekoti marasisi a medas.
Obviously, that makes the Electoral Commission a key institution in our democracy. However, that is not to say that the Electoral Commission is the most important factor in a democratic election. I think that this comes out clearly in a simplified definition of a democratic election as a contest among political parties or candidates mediated by an electoral commission and decided by the votes of the electorate. Based on this definition, voters come first, followed by political parties and candidates, and then the electoral commission in a ranking order of importance for the three main actors in a democratic election. I think the justification for this ranking is rather straightforward. There can be no election at all if there are no candidates. And an election cannot be said to be democratic if there are no voters to decide the winner. For this reason, the primacy of the voter and the attendant sanctity of the duly cast vote are regarded as central pillars of the principles of electoral justice. The ranking also underscores the need for political parties to be closely involved in the electoral process. In this regard, I think that the Electoral Commission must view the Inter-Party Advisory Committee, IPAC, as a convenient forum for discussing changes to our electoral practices, irrespective of whether the intended change originates from the Commission or the parties. The reason is that it is not good practice to foist changes in electoral practices on important stakeholders like political parties. It is prudent to discuss any intended changes thoroughly at IPAC meetings with a view to achieving consensus. If consensus is achieved, the IPAC then becomes a convenient vehicle for disseminating the changes to the electorate. Let me say that during discussions at the IPAC, the Electoral Commission is not bound to accept a position even if it is supported by all the political parties. It's not a voting matter. How many parties do we have? On the books, maybe about 19. How many commissioners are there? Assuming that all of them go to IPAC. 7. If all of them, then it will be 19 to 7. No, it is not that kind of matter. And the reason why they are not bound to accept some decision, even if all the political parties support it, is that the political parties can take a stand which constitutes an obstacle to the realization of the electoral rights of the people. When that happens, it is the duty of the Electoral Commission to uphold and protect the rights and interests of the people. I'd like to give a very simple example. The political parties once wanted the Electoral Commission to make it mandatory for people to produce their voter ID cards on election day before they are allowed to vote. The Electoral Commission said no to this no card, no vote campaign, explaining that it is the Constitution and not the card that creates the right to vote. The card makes it easy to identify you as a registered voter. So, on election day, if your name is on the register, which is the legal requirement, but you don't have from voter registration through voting operations to the collation of votes and the declaration of results. In doing so, it must pay particular attention to points where the election process is vulnerable to adulteration. I'm sure that the Electoral Commission is aware that most of the election controversies in recent times have centered on the counting and collation of votes. For this reason, I consider the setting up of regional collation centers in our presidential election to be a retrogressive step, because it increases the number of points at which results can be manipulated. I understand that we borrowed the practice from Nigeria, surprisingly at a time when Nigeria was seeking ways to send results straight from the polling stations to one location. It is to be noted that Parliament approved the practice. The second requirement for achieving free and fair elections is a favorable external environment. In this regard, I have said many times that an electoral commission can make the best preparations possible for an election. But if the external environment is not right, the prospect for a free and fair election can be likened to washing a piece of white cloth in murky water and hoping that it will not be stained. Unfortunately, several aspects of our elections are unacceptable because of murky factors in the external environment. And I want to call attention to 4 of them. First, violence. Some people say that violence in our election did not start yesterday.